On October 9, 2025, after more than 2 years of relentless war, Israel and Hamas reached what the world is calling a major breakthrough: a ceasefire and hostage prisoner exchange deal. Under this agreement, Israel began pulling back its forces from much of Gaza, repositioning them to pre-agreed lines. Hamas, in turn, promised to release all remaining living hostages within 72 hours of the ceasefire taking effect. Israel would also free hundreds of Palestinian prisoners, including women, children, and long-term detainees. The United Nations prepared for what it described as a humanitarian surge, trucks of food, medicine, and supplies flowing into Gaza for the first time in months. Families who had fled bombardment began to trickle back into the ruins of their neighborhoods. For the first time in a long time, the sound of airstrikes was replaced by the sound of cautious movement. People walking, not running. It felt for a moment like a corner had been turned. Yet the truth is more complicated. Because while the peace deal is real, the forces holding it together are fragile. And behind the headlines lies a far more complex story. One about politics, power, and survival. This is the story behind the story, and what comes next for Israel, Hamas, and the millions caught between them. Let's get started. To understand the significance of this deal, we have to step back. The war began on October 7, 2023, when Hamas launched a surprise attack into southern Israel. Over 1,000 people were killed, and hundreds were taken hostage. Israel's response was massive, a military campaign across Gaza aimed at dismantling Hamas's leadership and military infrastructure. For more than 2 years, the war devastated Gaza. Whole neighborhoods were leveled. Infrastructure collapsed. Hospitals ran out of fuel and medicine. And for civilians, daily life became a struggle for survival. Throughout 2024 and early 2025, there were multiple ceasefire attempts. Some lasted weeks, others just days. But each broke down amid mutual accusations of violations. In March 2025, a temporary truce collapsed when Israeli airstrikes hit Gaza once again, reigniting full-scale conflict. It was only after months of battlefield stalemate, mounting international pressure, and humanitarian disaster that negotiations restarted. Mediated by the United States, Egypt, and Qatar, and quietly supported by Turkey and Jordan, the parties began to talk seriously. The result is what we're seeing now: a phased peace plan that both sides reluctantly agreed to. It's a fragile truce born from exhaustion, not trust. Officially, this is being described as a ceasefire and hostage exchange deal. But it's more than that, and also less. Israel's cabinet approved the agreement after hours of internal debate. Within 24 hours, troops began pulling back from much of Gaza. Hamas, in return, began preparing for the release of hostages still held in its custody. On paper, this looks like progress. In reality, many of the deal's key points remain deliberately vague. There's no full disarmament clause for Hamas, something Israel had once demanded. Nor is there a clear plan for who will govern Gaza once the fighting stops. Hamas insists that Gaza's sovereignty must remain in Palestinian hands. But many international negotiators, wary of Hamas retaining control, have floated the idea of a temporary technocratic administration, something Hamas and other Palestinian factions have flatly rejected as foreign guardianship. Another point of contention is the issue of high-profile prisoners. Israel has refused to release figures like Marwan Barghouti, a widely respected Palestinian leader seen by some as a future unifying force. That decision has already drawn criticism from across the Arab world and could become a flashpoint later. And then there's the matter of enforcement. Ceasefires in this region often collapse because there's no neutral authority strong enough to hold both sides accountable. Each side sees violations through its own lens, and one skirmish can quickly spiral into open war. So, while the terms look promising on paper, the peace remains built on sand, fragile, shifting, and vulnerable to the first strong wind. Since the deal went into effect, scenes on the ground have shifted dramatically. In Gaza, thousands of residents have begun walking back toward their homes, or what's left of them. Entire districts have been flattened, their streets choked with debris. Electricity lines hang loose, and clean water is scarce. The physical scale of destruction is staggering, a visual reminder that ending a war is not the same as rebuilding a society. At the same time, the United Nations and aid organizations are ramping up operations. convoys of humanitarian trucks have begun crossing into Gaza, carrying food, medicine, and fuel. The goal is to reach over 2 million people who've been surviving on the edge. But every delivery still depends on Israeli security clearance, and every crossing is watched closely. From the Hamas leadership side, there's been a declaration of victory through endurance. Khalil al-Hayya, one of Hamas's senior figures, claimed that international mediators, including the United States, have provided written guarantees that the war is now over. Whether that claim holds up over time remains to be seen. Israel, meanwhile, has been careful with its messaging. Officials describe the deal as a humanitarian necessity, not a political concession. The government remains divided. Hardline factions accuse the prime minister of caving to pressure, while moderates argue that the deal was inevitable to preserve stability and international support. For ordinary Israelis and Palestinians alike, the reactions are mixed: relief, suspicion, exhaustion. Everyone knows this isn't the end of the story. It's simply the next chapter. If neither side truly trusts the other, why did this deal happen now? The answer lies in a combination of military, political, and humanitarian realities. After more than 2 years of conflict, both sides were running out of options. Hamas had suffered significant territorial and leadership losses, while Israel's prolonged campaign had drawn global criticism and deepened political fractures at home. Economically, the war was draining Israel's resources, while in Gaza, it was destroying what little remained of daily life. Public opinion in Israel began to shift. Families of hostages demanded action. Business leaders warned of economic fallout. Even military planners questioned the long-term strategy of endless combat. For Hamas, the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza was becoming impossible to justify. International aid agencies estimated that more than half the population was displaced, and food insecurity had reached extreme levels. The group's leadership needed a political win, or at least a breathing space. International actors, too, were under pressure. The United States pushed hard for progress, framing this as a diplomatic success after years of gridlock. Egypt and Qatar, the main regional mediators, saw the deal as a way to reassert their influence. Even Turkey and Saudi Arabia quietly supported the push, seeing stability as good for business and regional power balance. In short, this deal wasn't born from trust or goodwill. It was born from exhaustion, a shared recognition that the war could not continue without destroying everything left. Every ceasefire carries within it the seeds of its own collapse, and this one is no different. On the Israeli side, nationalist ministers and parts of the security establishment remain skeptical. They fear Hamas will use the lull to regroup, rearm, and rebuild its network of tunnels and smuggling routes. For them, anything less than total elimination of Hamas is unfinished business. Within Gaza, not all factions are on the same page either. Groups allied to Hamas, but outside its direct control, like Islamic Jihad, have signaled that they'll observe the truce for now. But in the volatile world of militant politics, for now can mean days, not months. Then there's the question of reconstruction. Who controls aid, contracts, and materials will determine who controls Gaza's future. For Hamas, maintaining that control is essential to its political survival. For the international community, it's a risk. Pouring money into rebuilding could entrench the very power structures that led to war. And of course, there's the trust deficit. Every ceasefire violation, every late prisoner release, every delay in aid delivery, all of it will be magnified and politicized. The truth is that both sides are locked in a delicate performance, each pretending confidence while preparing for the possibility that this peace won't last. So, what comes next? There are 3 broad paths forward. The first is cautious success. The ceasefire holds, hostages and prisoners are exchanged, and reconstruction slowly begins. Over time, a hybrid governance structure could emerge in Gaza, part Palestinian Authority, part local administration, with Hamas's influence reduced but not erased. The region stabilizes, at least temporarily. The second possibility is managed stagnation. The fighting stops, but tensions remain high. Small skirmishes break out, aid trickles in inconsistently, and both sides accuse each other of violations. The world loses interest, attention drifts, and the peace becomes a long, uneasy pause. And then there's the third scenario: collapse. If trust breaks, if extremists act, or if political winds shift, the ceasefire could unravel in weeks. Rockets could return, airstrikes could resume, and the region could find itself right back where it started, but with even less hope for diplomacy next time. Given history, the second option, stagnation, seems most likely. But even a flawed peace is better than no peace at all. While this conflict feels far away for most Western audiences, its implications stretch far beyond Gaza's borders. For Washington, this deal is a test of American influence, a chance to prove that diplomacy still matters in a region increasingly shaped by other powers like China and Russia. For Europe, it's a matter of stability. Fewer wars mean fewer refugees and fewer global shocks. For neighboring countries, Egypt, Jordan, and Lebanon, the ceasefire offers relief but also risk. If Gaza collapses again, the spillover will hit their borders first. Meanwhile, and for ordinary citizens across the world, the lessons are sobering. This conflict shows how modern warfare rarely ends with victory. It ends with exhaustion, negotiation, and fragile compromise. Peace today is not about who wins, but who can endure the pressure to stop fighting. In the months ahead, the fate of this peace will be decided not by big speeches or grand ceremonies, but by small details. Whether aid trucks keep rolling, whether hostages make it home, whether borders stay quiet, whether people can sleep without the sound of drones overhead. Every day of calm will count as a small victory. Every violation will carry the risk of unraveling everything. The Israel-Hamas peace deal is not a miracle. It's not even a resolution. It's a pause. A hard-earned, fragile moment in which both sides decided that war had reached its limit. But even a pause can change history. It gives people time to breathe, to rebuild, and perhaps to imagine a different kind of future. Whether this truce becomes a foundation for lasting peace, or just another chapter in a long story of conflict, depends on what happens next, not in conference rooms, but on the ground, among the people who have lost the most. In the end, peace is never declared in press releases. It's built day by day in the quiet moments after the guns fall silent. You've been watching a Nexus-Feed deep dive session. If you found this insightful, make sure to like and share the video. Subscribe to the channel for more in-depth analysis of topics shaping global directions in politics, business, and technology. And let us know your thoughts on the topic in the comments section too. Until our next one, stay curious, stay critical, and keep safe.